utilize this type of platform to generate more business for us. It helps open the door for some more opportunities. Like we're working on a blog right now, industry focused, that ultimately that's an income source.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Hey, podcaster. It's your host, Adam A. Adams. And today I am joined with another Denverite, Mr. Rick Doherty. I almost messed it up. Rick Doherty. It has lots of extra letters, guys, and I'm dyslexic, so you got to understand. And at the end of this episode, just stick around because you might hear a new business idea about flipping vans or renting out camper vans, something that Rick does. And he's looking to start a podcast. And as you know, many of these podcast episodes are me solo pouring into you. And the episode after today is just going to be you and I. And the opposite episodes, normally me interviewing somebody who's already a podcaster. But what I decided to do is just kind of open up my calendar for some free coaching. And we still do charge $500 for it. But some people have paid that. It's just that I thought, if we can record these calls, then it's valuable to everybody. And so I'm not going to charge $500. I'm just going to say, hey, let me just record it and put it out on the airwaves and support my listener. That's you. And so Rick agreed to jump in and ask me a couple of questions that you probably also want to know about starting and launching his brand new podcast. And so let's dive in. Rick, your bio is already in the show notes. I'm not going to go through it. The listener can just scroll down. And finally, whenever you launch this podcast, we're going to go in and add your podcast episodes. So in 1 year from now and 10 years from now, anybody who wants to check you out can also get your podcast as well. So we'll be able to kind of add some value to there. Why don't you turn it over to you and reverse the interview and ask me whatever you want?
Awesome. Appreciate it. And all this is awesome. I've been a big fan of yours for a while in the real estate circuit. And that was my background. Question I have initially with start is overcoming the fear of starting it. I'm transitioning from a real estate podcast into what I'm doing more full-time now, which is van building. I don't see too much out there in the form of a podcast. The idea that I have would be, I don't want it to just be about building. My idea would be to interview kind of three sets of people, would be other builders, vendors in the industry, and then people actually living full-time in a van. I guess the question would be, would that be too much to take on, or would that be an interesting kind of piece to cover, in my opinion, all narratives in the industry?
All right. I've got some notes down on what you're asking, and I want to verify and maybe even get more clarity on a piece of it. You said that mainly you want to overcome the fear of starting your podcast. And then you went into saying basically that you'd like to interview three types of people: builders, vendors, and people living down by the river in a van down by the river. And those were my words, not yours. Actually, those were Chris Farley's words, not mine. But I'm kind of curious where is the fear coming from? Is the fear coming from basically, am I interviewing the right people for the right reasons, or is the fear coming from something else?
That's a great question. I think it's tied into a piece of it. Am I going too broad, or would it make sense to be more focused on one particular niche? And then the fear is just starting, is who the hell is going to listen to this? Or, that type of the common everyday fear that we all probably have as entrepreneurs of starting something new. I know the easiest thing to do is rip the Band-Aid off and get started. So I can overcome that.
Okay. Let me understand three things before I give you any advice. If you're listening to this episode right now, just remember these are the three things you need to know before you ever figure out a damn thing about your podcast. These are the prereqs to launching a podcast. They're prereqs to having any content. They're the prereqs to everything you do and how you do it. Without them, you can't be intentional. Without them, you can't begin with the end in mind. You'll just start, you'll dabble, you'll flounder and fail. But if you got these three things, you'll be fine. So, Rick, The three things that I need to understand before I can give you any advice is, what's your goal with the podcast? What is your goal? I'm curious, like, are you looking to make money? Are you looking to sell more? Are you looking to network with people? Let's figure that out. Are you looking to rent more of these, increase passive income? If you can give me the best idea of what your real goal or why you think you would even have a podcast, that'll help. The other two things are, who is this? I need to type better. I crushed my hand jeeping, Rick, like about 4 months before we record this. And so I was in Moab and I literally crushed my hand. And people say who watched the video that I'm lucky to have a hand at all. And so I shouldn't complain, but I have these two fat fingers that don't bend all the way. They're better than they have been, but I still can't freaking type. Who is this pod for? That means who's your avatar? Who is the person? So what's your goal? What do you want to accomplish? Who is your avatar? And the third one is, how are you different? How do you serve them differently? Okay. What's your goal?
So my goal would to, again, I think it comes back to what I mentioned a few minutes ago of like, there's not a ton, if any, with a podcast. Like in real estate, there's a ton of people out there giving advice or free advice or here's a how-to. I'd really like for us to become the authority in the space. This is multifaceted, which is why I struggle with moving forward. Authority in the space, there's so many different, there's always new technology coming out now. So like to be at the forefront of providing that info to people, like how to build a van. I know it's kind of a weird thing, but like it's not anymore. It's like, this is a mainstream thing and it's only going to grow. And then another big piece of this is a lot of people ask, how do we make money on the road? And I'd love the goal would be to help guide people into the opportunity to like syndications or whatever. Like, here's a way to take 25, 50 grand. Here's a building block. So to encompass the entrepreneurial piece of this and not just have it be van building. I don't know if that really answered the question, but like it's not just a one answer. That's my hiccup.
I think it's currently at surface level, and why I want to go deeper. And so let me discuss with the listener as well for a moment. How do we figure out what is surface level and what is like the real root of something? And the way that I've done it in a mastermind for raising capital that I used to run a few years ago, 2018, I think it was, so several years now. During the mastermind, we would do the 6 layers of why. And we would ask somebody at that time, why do you want to raise capital? And they would say, so I can close deals. And then we would ask them another time, okay, why do you want to close deals? No, because I want money. Mm-hmm. Okay, why do you want money? Because you need money to live. Why is living important? Why do you care about living? Why do you need to live? Why do you need to live comfortably? And it comes down to something maybe that they say, I want my dad to be proud of me. He was never proud of me. And they start bawling and they start crying. And when you get to that 6th layer, tears are shedding, but you can feel the root cause of why you're doing this. And when that happens, and this goes back to overcoming your fear of starting your podcast. Mm-hmm. When you have this deeper reason why, I mean, I want to be an authority. I want to teach people how. These are surface level. Sure. You're not crying when you say them. And I'm not trying to get you to cry on the podcast specifically, but I do want to go a little bit deeper. Like, for example, you don't feel like there's enough content, but why do you care if there's content? Why does it matter to you? Secondly, you want to be the authority, but why does it matter if you're the authority or if somebody else is the authority? Mm-hmm. If there is an authority, why does it have to be you? You want to be on the forefront of everybody's mind. You want to teach people how to build a van. Okay, but how does this serve you? How does it help you? How does it get you to some goal that makes you happy or makes your dad proud or makes your wife or your kids, whatever, be able to go to the school of their dreams or whatever? And then how do we make money on the road? So why do you want to pour that stuff? So let's just figure out what's deeper than the 4 things that you told me.
Sure. Yeah, deeper would be, or some things, I mean, I know this is multifaceted as well, but I want something to be proud of, a business that's growing and flourishing, and something that it's a family business, right? It's my brother and I have this like deeper, I love helping people. That's really like a big thing. Like I've got a big heart in the idea of like I grew up playing sports. I was a basketball player, and like, it's interesting, had this like killer instinct when it came to basketball. And like, as I've gotten older, I wouldn't say I've lost completely the killer instinct, but it's like, instead of like wanting to take you down as being the #1 podcast in the world, it's just like, how do I prevent enough value to people that it encourages and inspires other people to do whatever they want to do in a way that feeds them? Like, that's what a lot of that lights me up, is helping people kind of see the light, get out of the normal 9 to 5. Everybody has, I think deep down has this desire to do more, and like to peel away the onion, kind of like we're doing right now. How do we get down into the core and actually bloom out from there? So I want to reach people in that kind of way.
Okay. So I'm hearing 3 really cool things. I think it's Tony Robbins. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that's where this is coming from. That basically talks about some number of human needs. I think it's 6 human needs, human desires, like the motivators. Some of them are, to survive. Some of them are, to be happy, to be alive, to be in love. Some human desires are, I want things to be consistent. Like I want a steady income. I want to do the same thing every day. Some human desire is, I want things to be inconsistent. I want to go on a different plane trip every month. I want to see something new. I want to experience something new. Some of them are just growth, like our personal growth. For example, I want to be healthier, fitter, stronger. I want to be happier. I want to be more wealthy. I want to be smarter. I want to read more books. And then there's the contribution as well. Like I want to give back. I want to leave a legacy. And contribution's one of the top ones. One of the top motivators. Like when I say top ones, I mean one of the later ones. And it basically means we've got to have some of these other things done and in place before we can go to the contribution. It sounds like one of the biggest pieces that I'm hearing, because like 3 of your answers go straight to the contribution. It's like, I want a family business that's growing and flourishing. You didn't say, I want a business that grows and flourishes, because I can tell that this is part outwardly focused as well. You also said you want to give back and help other people because you have a big heart. You also said you want to inspire others and help them to figure out a new way, because you assume that a lot of people want this and that you've got something that can help them. So you're basically leaving a legacy. All of that's really, really good. I want to make sure that there is more than that. And I did hear some things that behind that sound like you want to make money from the podcast. Can you tell me about that?
That's a good question. I don't know what all the ins and outs of like making money from a podcast is, other than like exposure of being in front of people. Yeah, I do want to utilize this type of platform to generate more business for us. But I think it helps open the door for some more opportunities. Like we're working on a blog right now, industry focused, that, ultimately, that's an income source. If we can profit and monetize this, that would be awesome to grow. Like, at the end of the day, freedom for me is time freedom. So to rewind kind of how I've connected house flipping and van building, currently where it's at right now, that's what it is. So it's like created jobs for ourselves. So it's like, how do we grow it and add a couple different revenue streams where we have the ability to hire the right people to replace us, and we can move up the chain and add a few more income streams that are more meaningful, more meaningful, but that are as meaningful as what we're doing right now.
Okay. I think I'm getting it. I'm going to get more when you tell me who you serve. So who would this podcast be there for? Like, who is your perfect listener?
I think the person would be somebody who wants the freedom to wake up. Van life provides that with the amount of companies that are allowing people to work from the road. It's a big undertaking to try to do it on your own. And if we can help more people narrow the time frame of building out their own, or if you just help them get that to a more reasonable point where less people are giving up, that would be who I think what we're to find.
Okay. Do you think you'd be building out vans for them? You think you're have like a call to action on the podcast that is like, if you're ready to build out your new Ram and travel the world for 18 months, then go to mywebsite.com/get started?
I think that's a piece of it. I mean, I don't think that's the driving factor. I think providing value and good content that'll happen organically that way. But yeah, ideally there'll be a call to action for that.
Okay. And so your avatar is somebody who wants to do it and doesn't want to have to figure it all out on their own. Do you think you could have maybe a call to action on the podcast that, even regardless if it's supporting you, I think it really would support your listener, where you gave them like the specs to your most popular Ram build or your most popular Sprinter build or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
I think you could give the blueprints for that away, or?
I think so. I mean, we've got a lot of ideas, a lot of pokers in the fire of ideas. That's one, is to have, here's our layout, A to Z, nuts of everything that goes in there. Here's the dimensions of everything. We've also thought about dummying down, ideally like a kit. I mean, that's another idea we've had.
Cool.
Is like,
cool,
to do that.
That'd be cool. I'd love that. That'd be really awesome. I was thinking before you mentioned kit, my brain was going another direction. I think the kit idea is probably better, but the other direction would probably work as well, where you state on your podcast, for example, like you could say something to the effect of, it has to be this exact sink, because like no other sink has these dimensions. It's not going to fit with the bed. It's not going to fit with the shower.
Yeah.
You need the toilet shower. It has to be this exact one, or you're only going to have a 1-person bed instead of a 2-person bed, or however you say it. You're probably really good at sales, and so you'll probably figure that out quickly. Basically, having affiliate links instead of the kit. I think the kit's way better. But it would be also cool to have a website where you got all those places where they can go and get everything.
And that's part of the blog idea, is that. Okay. So we're actually my wife is actually working on that, but we're following a course.
Nice.
And that's geared specifically, that's a big piece of it. So to have that but yeah, 100%.
Cool. All right. I'm loving this so far. And then third question was, how do you serve that person differently? So let's go back. Rick wants to inspire and help. He's got a big heart. He's there to really leave a legacy and make an impact on the world. And specifically to somebody who wants van life, who wants to try van life, who wants to attempt it, who wants to start it, who doesn't want to figure out all this stuff on their own and mess up and spend more, do it twice, buy the wrong van completely. He wants to be able to streamline their success. But now the third question that you need to figure out before you do anything on your podcast is, how do you serve them? What is your niche? What do you do differently than somebody else that's out there? And the answer, Rick, cannot be, well, nobody else is doing it right now. I'm not down with that.
Like what the initial pieces is like, I don't feel like I'm as money motivated as other people. Like I truly want to just help people. Money's important, don't get me wrong, but that's not the ultimate drive. That's not solely who's driving the bus. So at the end of the day, I feel, and not that people don't care, I think I've got a good ability to connect with people and actually take a step back, empathize with them, and truly care, listen to their situation. I think that's one of my superpowers, is to actually sit down and actually get to know somebody, hear their story, and not just try to ram an idea down their throat, but to work with them in a way that best suits them. That's my answer for that right now. I'm sure we'll go a little bit deeper with some feedback.
So what I'm hearing is none of this came out of you sounding malicious or anything. And I hope that the listener doesn't think that the way that I approach it is, but I try to be real cut and dry about things. I try to make it like just really easy to understand. So I want to ask you this question in a different way. It almost feels like you are noticing that there's a lot of people out there, but some of them might not have everybody's best intention. They might be thinking about money first. And that's one way that you can support your listener is by focusing on their needs instead of yours. Because some of your competition, if you will, it sounds to me, Rick, like you don't feel like everybody out there feels the same way as you. Is that right?
I feel that way, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So integrity is probably one of your biggest drivers out there as well. Do you follow entrepreneur EO, not EOF? I'm not trying to say Entrepreneur on Fire. I'm trying to say Traction and Gino Wickman. He wrote 3 books. I just can't think of them all. Traction. I'm gonna just type it out. And now
I know of Traction. That's it.
Okay. Well, let me type in Gino Wickman, and we will put all 3 of these books. We'll put all 3 of the books in the show notes in case, since we brought them up, I want to make sure that there's a resource for everybody. Gino Wickman books. Rocket Fuel, Traction, and what the heck is EOS? I was saying EO, but yeah, what the heck is EOS? So why did I even start that conversation? What was it? Oh, integrity. Yeah, because in Traction, you have basically company values. You want your whole company to live by. And I'm guessing that one of your values is going to be integrity, and the other one is probably going to be putting the customer first.
Sure. 100%.
Anyway, we did that in my real estate business. We did Traction and our weekly level 10 meetings and all this random stuff, but we had our values, and it was funny to come up with the values. It took a lot of everybody put out all of the values that they think are important, and literally almost every value is important to almost everybody. But then you have to kind of figure out the hierarchy of what everybody believes in together, and then make sure that you have a company culture around it. But I feel like your integrity and putting the customer first are 2 of your biggest ones. But
yeah.
Okay. So now we know what's your goal with the podcast. We also know who is it for, and we also know how do you serve differently. And I think this is going to help us to overcome some fear of starting the podcast. And I hesitate on one thing, but I have to say it to you, Rick. I hesitate on it a little because I always tell my listener, you got to go ready, aim, fire, not ready, fire, aim. I always tell them, don't listen to those dummies who tell you, don't overthink it, just start. And then I come and contradict myself with you today, Rick, because I don't want you to be overthinking it. I think you have a great idea. I think you are doing it for the right reason. I think that it's going to clearly grow your family business. It's going to help you leave that legacy that you're ultimately looking for. And so sometimes we just have to exercise that muscle that is weak. And I say this to my son sometimes because in the past, it's not like I'm a perfect dad now, but in the past I was more short, even shorter temper. And what that did to my oldest son and I is he becomes afraid to approach me. He becomes afraid to ask if he can have a sleepover. He becomes afraid to ask me if he has to eat all of his meal. Because in the past, I was an asshole. I didn't approach it the right way. And we're working on this piece of our relationship. And as I see him being shy and timid, I sit down close with him and I say, hey, we've got to flex this muscle. You're afraid to ask me, and there's nothing I can do to help you. There's nothing I can personally do. All I can do is when you ask me, I can try to be better than I used to be. But he's got to get used to coming up to me and asking me, hey, can I have a sleepover? Hey, I'm really full. Do I have to finish my food? Because when he does practice, when he does exercise that muscle it will end up, it might feel uncomfortable in the beginning, but then it's going to end up with something a little bit better than it used to. And slowly that muscle is going to get stronger. We don't go to the gym once and we are as ripped as Rick. We don't just go once. We need to spend time going for, a year or 2 or 3. 3 months will do something great. Yes. But a year or 2 or 3 or 10 or 12, that's when we start looking like the bodybuilders that are on TV, because it's incremental. It's very small. But we get stronger. We get used to it. And for you, I feel like there is just simply an unknown of the podcast. And you jumping in, you getting involved, you being here with me today, you starting to think about interviews, starting to get some of these things ready, is going to give you that comfort, is going to make you feel a little bit more ready for it. I wouldn't feel comfortable dribbling a basketball next to you because I haven't put in the 10,000 hours. Mm-hmm. But I would feel real comfortable having you on my podcast because it's a zone that I've put in some reps. Yep. And you just got to find a way to put in your reps for your podcast, and not to say, I suck at basketball, so I'm not even going to try against Rick. You got to understand that we all start somewhere. And I think that might be partly where you are, is just like, I'm not sure. I don't know what I don't know. What if I mess up? And then furthermore, what if no one listens? So let's address that now. Fear is just starting. So we've already addressed that. Good. And then who the hell is going to listen to this? I think that's a direct quote from Rick Doherty. Who the hell is going to listen to this? Well, you already know that there's a need. Yeah. For me, Rick, I'm going to tell you a quick story. In elementary, and I hope this helps the listener too. In elementary, I got made fun of because I was the smallest person in my school. I got held back in second grade, and that made me feel really bad. Yeah. My mom held me back. Well, my grades were always suffering the whole time. And every teacher was like, we kind of think he should be held back. And my mom was like, nope, nope, nope. But I was so freaking small that she was hoping that if she did hold me back, then I wouldn't be the smallest kid in the class. So in second grade, she went ahead and did it. Well, I was embarrassed about that. I was embarrassed that I didn't have the humor of all the other kids. I didn't get all the jokes that they were getting. I didn't care about the stuff that they cared about. I was kind of a loner. I was off into my own stuff, figuring out weird things because I was a weirdo, still am. And it made me feel really uncomfortable. And people would make fun of me. I remember I was in kindergarten and the teacher said, "Hey, what's your birthday?" And I said, "Summer." And I was just with a new 3-year-old yesterday, and I asked him his birthday, and he told me September 8th, a 3-year-old. And I was 5, and I said, my birthday is summer. So anyway, that's me. I got made fun of. I was a runt. I was smaller. I would get in fights with people because I didn't have the intellectual, emotional maturity to have a conversation. I thought if I beat you up, I was right, having my feelings hurt because your nose hurts. Mm-hmm. And so I was going through this stuff. It lasted my whole life. It still lasts. I still feel uncomfortable many times. I'm still shy. I'm still going through things because kindergarten. And what helps me most to get on a stage, and this is a stage. Today, we're speaking to more than just one listener. Mm-hmm. And, there's thousands of people that listen to this podcast every episode. So probably 3,500, 6,500 will hear you today. Well, that made me feel uncomfortable. That made me feel like I was going to get judged. I'm not the most eloquent person. I'm ADD. I'm dyslexic. My brain just doesn't work the way that I think everybody's works. In some ways, it could be better. Yeah, sure. In many ways, it's worse. But I'm still self-conscious about it. The point that I'm making is when you think of your imposter syndrome, who am I? Who's going to listen to me? I still do that too. And I've put out 850 episodes at least. Just on this podcast alone, this is coming out somewhere around the 300th episode, around there. And I had another podcast that went to 600 and something. So the imposter syndrome will never stop. I've put out 800 episodes and still I feel uncomfortable giving value about podcasting. How would that be? There's people that don't seem to care and they've put out one episode or they haven't even started and they want to give you advice. Yeah. I've done 800 episodes and I'm still I'm not sure. So what gets me over it? It goes back to the leaving the legacy and having a big heart and caring about other people. And so I feel uncomfortable many times. But what gets me over it is forgetting about me and how dumb I am and how dumb I sound and how whatever it is, all these insecurities, and truly starting to think, what does the listener need right now? Like, I don't need to be the most eloquent person. What does Rick need? What does Rick need? What's going to help inspire Rick to actually just start this podcast? Because I've had a ton of people on my show that have had a podcast for a few years, and I'll ask them a question, Rick. I'll say, how long did you think about starting a podcast before you started it? Some of them say 6 weeks, and I'm blown away because most of them say a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And it goes to this place where we are uncomfortable to put ourselves out there. But if you stop thinking about yourself and what people are going to think of you and just think about the value and what people need, it's divine. It's like almost from God or the universe. It becomes something incredible, and it allows us to get over our fear pretty rapidly. That, and at least knowing your 6 layers of why until you start crying, and then you're like, you're with your wife and you're doing, you tell your wife, ask me why 6 times. And what's going to happen is you're going to start bawling, and you're going to basically scream at her or to her and be like, I'm fucking starting this thing today. Because the passion will be there so much after you feel it that deeply. So I recommend that stuff to you. Is there any other question that you want to ask before we jump off? Anything at all?
I did have a question. Now I lost it, but thank you for that. That was beautiful. I totally did. And now is there any benefit in having a more structured approach to, like, we're going to do 30 minutes and I've got a list of 5 questions. Is there any benefit, in your opinion, of doing that, or the more organic, kind of off the cuff type of strategy?
There's probably benefit to both. There's most likely some benefit to both. I would be careful thinking 5 questions, 30 minutes, only because you've asked me one question, it's been 50. Yeah. Right? You've asked me one question, it's been 50. When I ask my guests questions, like when I'm the one interviewing them, I really only have a chance to ask them 3, 4, 5, 6 questions, and it normally will take about an hour. Okay. And so just be aware that it's always going to take a little bit longer. And I think sometimes for real value and tangible, like takeaways, that's something that's going to really change you. Sometimes you have to go a little bit deeper. And that just means when you ask me a question, I try to give it a 30,000 foot view, and then I try to give a few details on a few of those parts so that the listener really can get the value, or so that you, Rick, can really like take this. And sometimes it's important to be able to spend that time and not just have a yes, no question. So just think about that. But going back to your current question, and then something else that I think you kind of were talking about before is, I kind of want to interview these 3 people. And now you're also saying, I'm wondering if I should kind of structure it or make it loosey-goosey and just kind of be there for the listener. There's a couple of approaches. One thing is, when you understand who is it that you're trying to serve, and also what is your purpose of the podcast, and also how do you serve them differently. When you have that foundation, it'll allow you to know the questions a little bit better. It'll allow you to know if your listener, your avatar, would prefer it to be kind of off the cuff, or if they would prefer to always know these 5 questions. You would also know, like, how many episodes in a row should they listen to? How many are they going to need before they're ready to get started? What is the call to action that's going to be ready to get started? And it leads you to figuring out, what questions will I ask? For me on my podcast, when I ask questions for a couple of reasons. One is I want clients, and I'm also interviewing my perfect avatar. Like, when I'll bring on a podcaster. And so a question that I usually ask is, what have you learned along the way? That's one of them. What have you learned by doing your podcast? Like, you've done 50, you've done 10, you've done 300, yesterday I interviewed somebody who did 1,300 episodes. Wow. You've done 1,300 episodes. What are you doing differently today now through all of this experience that you didn't maybe do in your first 100? And we get some good advice there. Another thing is, I'll ask them, what are you currently struggling with? And to me, this benefits 3 people. It can benefit the guest because they might say what they're struggling with, and I might be able to help them while we're being recorded. Secondly, the listener knows how many episodes they've already done and sees that they're still struggling, and now can be inspired to say, man, I could really start my podcast because like this person's still messed up with this thing. And that's what I was worried about. And they've already done 100. So I guess I should get started. And so that benefits the listener. Third, it benefits me. It could benefit me because the guest who's a podcaster might say, I'm struggling with this. If I can either tell them right then while we're being recorded, or if I could tell them after the recording and just say, hey, bro, like I can seriously help you with that one thing that you're looking for. This is how my company does it. If you're interested, if you have the budget for it, just holler at me and we can schedule a discovery call about it. And then I might possibly bring on another client and make lots of money. So I've curated a few questions that maybe I don't ask every single time completely structured, but I usually ask because it serves all three people so well. And to me, I don't think my listener cares. I'm just being honest. I don't think my listener, my avatar, truly would care if I ask the same 5 questions every single time, or if it's off the cuff every single time, or if it's a mixture between. So I end up just doing a mixture in between, doing what I feel. And if I don't have a direction, this is kind of how I do it, Rick. I don't have a direction. I'm not sure where to take this. That's okay. I got 6 questions that I ask a lot of people. I already memorized them, or if you don't, then you can put them on a Post-it note on your computer, and you never have to lack for anything. You can just say, let me ask you a question I ask a lot of guests. And then you just look at your thing and it says, how did you launch your podcast?
Perfect. Yeah.
Or let me ask you a question. What are you doing right now to grow your podcast? You got these questions kind of like queued up and ready to go, and then you can just use them. So hopefully that helps. But also thinking about your 3 people, the builders, the vendors, and the people living down by the river. I believe that if those are your 3 sets of people, honestly, my intuition is that the avatar, the how you serve them, and your goal through the podcast is going to be served by you making sure to interview those 3 sets of people. So to give you feedback on something you basically asked earlier, I want to give you permission to interview those 3 people. I think it'll work out really well.
Awesome.
And then the length of the episode, 30 minutes. Do not focus on the length as the most important thing.
Okay. Please.
And that's for the listener too. Don't focus on the length of the episode as the most important thing. I've said this many times on the podcast, but Rick, you haven't heard it, so I'm going to share it with you. If you're thinking that I need to stay under a certain number, then you might actually cut out some really good content because you are trying to achieve a length of time that you're held on to. And so you don't serve your avatar. Second, if you are thinking that it needs to be a certain length, and so you're trying to fill the space with unnecessary things, then your listener might feel like it's not as valuable. There's too much banter. There's too much extra stuff. Maybe I can find another podcast where it just gives me the content that I want. So if you focus on just who is my avatar, what do they need? Yes, just like we've talked about a few times in this podcast. Who are they? What do they need? And then what details will help them to make that decision? What details will help them to do that thing? What details will help them to be able to save money? And then you share it with them. If it's 5 minutes, they will be happy. And if it's an hour and 20, they will be happy. So just want to share that.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, man, we hit our time. And so we got to go. But I think that the listener got a lot out of it. And Rick, if you need any help, see, this is me being willing to offer my services. If you need any help, we're here at Grow Your Show. And at the end of this episode, keep listening because we're going to learn more about Rick's van life and what he's doing for other people and all of that. So I will let you go, brother. Thank you and good luck.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. See you guys on the next episode.
By the way, one way to ensure that you don't miss out on great content that we're producing on a regular basis is to make sure you're subscribed to the show. You need to be subscribed or following the Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to it in order not to miss all of that. And before I let you go, I need to mention, because a lot of people are asking, do you help? Can you help me with this? And the answer is yes. My company actually does it. It's called Grow Your Show. And you can find that at growyourshow.com. Our clients, they call us the easy button for podcaster because they simply have to record their episode. And they know that every single thing else is done for them. We sweat the hard stuff so you can be the star of your show. And if you would like help to make sure that we're editing and publishing and promoting and doing your social media, it's all in one place. And I think it's pretty affordable. You'll have to take a look for yourself. Just go to growyourshow.com and check us out. And by the way, I'll see you on the next episode.